Welcome to HirePhD Alternative Career Path Success Stories. I'm Connie, your host today. Today we have Joel Atwater, who was the head of portfolio management at Google Research. Welcome, Joel.
Hi, Connie. Great to be here.
Hey, so thank you. So let's start by telling us about yourself.
So I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up in Vancouver. Went through high school, went to UBC, studied mechanical engineering, then ended up doing a master's and a PhD in civil engineering, looking at tidal energy. This was kind of the mid 2000s, and really there was a lot of interest, and I found it fascinating, the work in renewable energy. So my graduate work was really focused around how do we understand how tidal energy works and how this new form of generation interacts with the environment. From there, founded a couple of startups, one in a technology called airborne wind power. So we flew kites with robots to make electricity. Then pivoted from that to underwater robotics, again in sort of the power generation side. And from there, this was after that startup, came down to the San Francisco Bay Area, to Silicon Valley, and ended up working for a lab that was at the time called Google X. It was the secret moonshot factory, a little bit before Alphabet became a thing, and worked on a couple of really kind of fantastic and crazy science fiction projects there. You know, we built a kite the size of a 737, tied it to the ground with 0.5 kilometer of carbon fiber, and then flew it around pulling 9Gs. So like just wild stuff. Took some used ML on fish, remapped the electricity grid using aerial photography. So like all the kind of crazy stuff that you can do with AI at the time. We called it machine learning at that moment. And then for the past 5 years, I've been at Google Research, really solving a problem that only Google has due to its size of a research organization and very bottoms-up culture. So Google Research had something like 4,500 AI researchers doing a lot of different things. And it was my job to try and get our arms around what the work was, and how that aligned with the overall corporate strategy at the highest levels. Did some stuff in sort of our stance on scientific publication, and really kind of understood and worked on the really early nascent AI that has now exploded into the ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini wildness that we're seeing right now. And from there, I'm back out in startup land and working on some interesting projects there.
Wow, what a journey. Yeah, this is I remember going to your is it called factory, looking at your startup stuff in Vancouver. Is so amazing, and also your title research was so amazing. Like, how did you go from startup and then to a big corporation? Like, how did that happen?
So when I tell the story just all in one thing, it seems like, oh, this is this nice transition, but it was really, really bumpy between each of these particular moments. So, if we dive into some of these first ones, like what actually happened in some of the transitions. So let's go back to tidal energy. So I had this thesis that was looking at how do we have different methodologies for assessing how much power a tidal energy turbine can extract from a particular flow. And it wasn't something that was particularly well developed at the time. I saw it as a hole in the literature, and it turned out to be, really fantastic research. The problem is the research had this very, very clear conclusion that tidal energy was not going to work. And this was a little bit of like a wah wah sad trombone moment, because I've spent my PhD time working on this thing that I've demonstrated has no future. So it's a little bit of like, well, okay, what do I do now? And it's a long story, but some very serendipitous moments of I happened to meet up with some old classmates from my undergrad who are working some other things, and this kind of became the nascent work for the first startup. And that was kind of the what transitioned into the technology development side from the research side, pure research side. But it really was this combination of like, well, the research had hit an end in that this technology was not going to work. And what do I do next? I had a very, very understanding supervisor that let me work on the startup at the same time as I was finishing up my dissertation. And yeah, did a startup, and so that was like one of the bumps was, you know, the research stopped, or the research didn't have a conclusion. And this kind of repeated through the other companies as well. So, the first startup, we made all of the mistakes. And, uh, it was, we did a lot. I'm really proud of what we accomplished in 2 years, but it was never going to be like any going concern. But the second startup, much, much better, took the concept to pilot plant. It still didn't work commercially, but, really proud of the technology that we developed. So, it was a little bit like in these moments, you're kind of thrown adrift of, the startup ran out of money and then you're done. And it's a little bit like, okay, well, what do we do next? And
Oh,
yeah, for me, that was moving to Silicon Valley, and it worked out. It was serendipity because the first project I worked on at Google X was this project called Makani, and it was an airborne wind power company. It was a startup that was acquired by Google a few years before. And this company was a direct competitor to my first startup. So it was one of these things of I was one of like 5 people in the world that had built a working kite power system at the time, and Google X happened to have a kite power project. So um, I think it's really disingenuous in some ways of like going back and saying, here's this history of how all of these steps happened. Yet there was a lot of disruption and churn in the midst of each of these chapters of my career so far.
yeah, I really love that what you said and share with the audience that a lot of the people like, oh, looking at Joe's LinkedIn, I'm like, whoa, this person's portfolio looks insane, like some superstar. Like, hey, behind success folks, there are a lot of challenges that you don't see, right? That Joe is sharing right now.
Yeah,
So
and it's I mean, you don't put that on LinkedIn, but
yeah.
everyone that does stuff has those moments.
Mm. Yeah, hope that's an encouraging point of sharing here. Yeah, like so, like touching on the startup part. Like you said, first startup, you basically learned from all the mistake you made, and the second one becomes better. Like so, now do you have any advice for folks who want to do a startup?
I mean, the space is so different now. So my first startup, we founded it late 2009. So this is when climate change was still investable. Hardware was something that startups did. AI was not really a thing. So, in 2009, we're still, what, a year and a half away from some of the early image recognition work that kicked off this whole thing. So it was a very, very different time. Um, so I think startups are a really interesting space right now. The possibilities that are enabled by AI right now, not just for doing AI things, but using AI to like vastly accelerate what an individual can do, especially in a startup context, kind of makes it, I think, a one of the best times to kick off a startup from what the capabilities are. On the other side, there's obviously a lot of economic uncertainty right now. Interest rates are high. Availability of capital is not necessarily the most awesome. Um, but there's never going to be a perfect time. And if startups are something that you want to do, um, it's certainly something that I had a lot of fun with. It's something that I've jumped back into, and I've never had a more rewarding time in my career than running my own companies.
Yeah, so this is the touching on that. So a lot of people now are doing like AI is a thing right now. They're doing lots of startup going on. Oh my God. So what do you think about that?
Oh, there's so many thoughts there. At my time at Google Research, like this is where most of the foundational AI work came from. So, I was very involved in as the technology as it was growing. I think we're at a point where we're both overhyped and underhyped. So we have companies that really don't have a lot of differential technology that have insane valuations with like no appreciable moat because they throw AI in the their name, and they have a little bit of software that they package up someone else's API and they send off requests, and they're like fundamentally not profitable. Uh, but these are companies that are getting funded, so that's in the like very overhyped side. On the underhyped side, we have this technology that is increasing in capability at exponential rate. And I use the term exponential in the literal sense, not the figurative, it's going very quickly. Like it is growing exponentially. And we are at the cusp of like a fundamental reshaping of our society and our economy with this technology. Like we are at the beginning of an industrial revolution, unquestionably. So AI is reshaping a ton of things right now. I would say that it has right now we're not at the point of independent AI, but what it allows right now is this like amazing force multiplier that someone that has initiative and drive and a goal to achieve has never been more formidable with the tools that they have available to get that done. And you can accomplish now as a single person what it would have taken a team to do in in the past. And I think that's just like a really exciting time. And I think it's going to have some really fascinating impacts in how companies and organizations run. Fundamentally, I think it's going to make everything smaller because the economies of scale that very, very large enterprises have enjoyed are now available to smaller organizations. But all of the organizational headwinds and bureaucracy and challenges of very, very big corporations will still exist. So I think the like ideal size of corporation, ideal size of organization is going to get smaller because of AI.
Wow, that is a revelation. Yeah. Thank you, Joel. Um, so we're gonna switch gear a little bit. Um, just curious of what you were doing your PhD. I know when I started PhD, I was like, I want to win the Nobel Prize, and then guess what? I'm not gonna win the Nobel Prize, right? So what were you thinking? Did you started out with wanting to stay in academia and something changed, and what changed?
Come
What
on,
did
Connie, your drunken nematodes are definitely going to get there.
you?
So I was pretty pragmatic about it.
Mm,
Um, so at the time, I was looking at the stats on number of PhDs graduated versus number of open faculty positions. So full disclosure, I come from a family that has
your
that
dad is a professor.
yeah, my dad's a prof. So like I grew up in academia, and I think I had a pretty good understanding of what it was about. So I was looking at the rates of PhD graduates per open faculty position. And in sort of the early 80s, the ratio was about 4 to 1. So, industry takes a couple of PhDs and then a couple sort of fight for a faculty position, and then that kind of tiers where they go. And by the time that I was looking to graduate in the late 20 noughts, it was up to 17 or 18 to 1 of where you had an enormous number of PhDs being graduated for each faculty position, and then seeing the change in what was being required of like 1, 2, maybe 3 postdocs. Um, and I kind of understood what the faculty life was like, and like it's pretty good, but it also wasn't like this is my calling. I really want to do this. So it was kind of between the numbers of like this is what it looks like and the likelihood of it panning out being high. Because remember, my PhD demonstrated that my field was going nowhere. So I wasn't necessarily even in the top uh, contenders for faculty positions after that, given my research. Basically decided, uh, industry is definitely the better path for me. Um, the thing that I really, really enjoyed is teaching, and I miss teaching. And I um, basically said to myself, like, my best path to becoming a teaching professor is to go out in industry, kick butt, and then come back as an adjunct.
Oh, yes.
Uh, of course,
Yeah.
I got too busy to contemplate that, but uh, yeah,
Yeah.
that was kind of my choice
Mm.
from academia.
Did you
And
regret it though? Did you still, if say somebody will offer you a faculty position, would you, at the time, would you go?
I don't think so now. I think
Mm.
um, I think there's a different pace outside academia that
Mm.
I appreciate. I think the availability for impact in a industrial setting is just so much larger than academia. And it doesn't have the same sort of underlying like curiosity-based research that really appeals to a lot of people, but I've always been applied. Like
Mm.
even
Yeah.
in academia, it has always been for a goal. So I don't personally feel a calling towards the research for curiosity's sake. I've always been trying to accomplish something. And often research is the means towards that. So I think I've seen now from my perspective that's better done outside.
Did
Uh,
your dad, how did your dad feel about that? He's a professor, so it's a different kind of pressure that not just our own professor want us to be a professor, you know?
I mean, he became a prof in a different time. So he
Mm.
was a practitioner before.
Oh.
Um, so he worked for the Environmental Protection Service of Environment Canada and put in a whole bunch of novel technology that was solving real problems. And I don't know if you know this. My dad doesn't actually have a PhD. Uh, so he is one of 2 professors when by the time that he retired, left at UBC that didn't have a PhD. So he got recruited from the federal government with this deal, I think out of civil engineering, of like, come do your PhD, and then like as soon as you're done your PhD, then you'll get your professorship because it was a different world in like the mid
Mm.
70s. And then he did that, and I think it was something like 6 months that he was there. Then the department changed its mind of like, nah, don't worry about the PhD thing. You're just now a professor.
You don't need one.
Yeah. Uh,
Oh, wow, different times. Yeah.
and I mean, can you possibly imagine that happening at like a tier 1 university now?
Yeah, no way. It's like that kind of touch on a great point too. Like now the institution is still functioning like it was, but it is not anymore, right?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
uh, that only might exist if you're a successful startup founder and have donated $10 million to the university, then you get a professorship.
Like honorarium professorship.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, shifting a gear a little bit. So many people want to get into Google. I'm sure like a lot of people say, oh, we're gonna talk about Google. So like just for your career path, I know it's quite special in Google research. Um, maybe touch on what other departments opportunity that PhD or masters might have in Google that you could recommend to them.
So Google has changed a lot. So I was there for a little over a decade. I joined in 2015, and I think the company was about 40,000 people at that point, and it's now 190,000.
Whoa.
So it's changed a lot. The culture has changed a bunch, and sort of the ways of working have changed a little bit. So I think in many ways the process that I got into Google doesn't exist anymore.
Mm.
Uh, in terms of what's happening now, um, from a Google perspective, like it has definitely become much more focused on AI and core business. So the work in flying wind turbines and stratospheric balloons and aquaculture has largely been refocused towards core business, just as the enterprise itself has matured. Google is also a very selective employer, both from a like individual, but also for the role that is being hired for. So it's one of these situations of Google is very fortunate to have such a huge population that wants to work for the company. And when I would post for a job to hire someone outside, I could probably find an expert in exactly that wanted to work for
Whoa.
Google. So it just in the same way as my path inside Google was I happened to be an expert at airborne wind power when Google needed an airborne wind power expert. And then there's internal mobility after the fact. So I think um, from a Google perspective, one, there's the generic software engineering path coming in, and then there's also the specialist path. And I think for people listening, don't be discouraged if some of um, the applications don't pan out. It's a very, very competitive market. And then because of um, the influx of experts, um, it really is like really tight fits
Mm.
are often who ends up getting in.
Mm. Yeah, don't get discouraged, right? And I know I get a lot of people, oh, I want to get into EA, and they get discouraged. I'm like, you know how many competitors you have? It's not that you're not good. It just they have too many choices.
There are too many choices.
Yeah.
Um, there's also just the sheer volume that you have a recruiter or a hiring manager that has a particular way that they like to review a resume, and like, or your resume ended up coming in 30th that they looked at that day, and we're skipping over verse second, and like there is a random component of it. Like sometimes things are looked at in a different light just due to kind of random factors. uh, but I think the ratios that I heard in sort of training are pretty insane for Google. It's like a 10,000 to 1 applicant to hire ratio. Like
Wow.
it's it's wild.
Yeah.
So uh, yeah, if you've applied and don't um, get a call back or don't get hired, like don't take it personally. And it's there's lots and lots of reasons why that didn't work out,
Mm.
that have nothing to do with your skill or talent.
Mm. That's a really comforting thought. Yeah, I'm probably gonna copy what you say to people who get disappointed on my side. Yeah. So maybe like more questions on um. Is there any tips on the resume when they're submitting their resume? And then second, is there any interview tips? I know you interview a lot of people in Google.
So right now, um, from my conversations with recruiters and people hiring right now, and so my colleagues, uh, because I haven't hired externally for a couple of years, I think the game has completely changed because of generative AI, and that everyone now has custom resumes, and there's so much slop that's just like filling up all of the hiring pipelines. So paradoxically, I think what's actually happening is we're moving back to informal hiring channels where it's less about the resume, it's less about the cold application. So, as I said, it was 10,000 to 1 before. I'm sure that number is much, much higher now because the barrier of making an application has gone down. And I think what it's been is the hiring processes have become overwhelmed by that. And it's going back to a little bit like, who do you know? And who have you met, and who puts your resume at the top of the file, and less about what's on that resume. Or
Oh,
less about like how that resume is formatted, or like the
yeah.
specific part of it.
Yeah, because HirePhD, we do teach people, okay, how do you make the resume stand out? Because you got to pass that 7-second recruiter time looking at your resume, right? And now the game won't change with all the AI stuff.
Yeah, I think like it's I don't want to say it's impossible to
Mm.
go in through a standard resume to a recruiter, but I think it's a whole lot harder.
Mm. Yeah, so that bring up a little bit networking, right? You were saying like the story of how did you, oh, your title title project is not going nowhere, and you talk to your friends, and then startup happens, right? So share with us some networking, the importance of networking, maybe.
I mean, networking is such a loaded term, and I think a lot of people hear it and like networking is something you do. So you go to this event and you do networking. And okay, you've gone to this networking event. You've talked with some person for 5 minutes. You've pulled out your QR codes and you've connected on LinkedIn, and like, congratulations, you've successfully networked. Now, is that person really going to help you at all to get one of the jobs that you want? Probably not. It's that next level of building relationships. So, I think probably it's better to ignore the term networking and just call it making friends. And I think if you approach it of like, oh, this is the person that I'm going to network with so that they can do something for me, it's probably not that great a use of time. Um, I think networking to like find interesting people that you want to have an ongoing conversation and relationship with, that's fantastic. I think finding collaborators through that, where it turns in, where it can be like a incrementally building relationship on a professional setting, that works. But I have not found just like the doing networking is is particularly valuable if it doesn't turn into something deeper. I would just call that like being friends, and like
Yeah,
you have professional friends. Oh,
yeah,
and professional and personal friends, and like that's what networking is, the first stage to developing actual relationships with people.
yeah, yeah. And I love the phrase about like, hey, don't go in with, oh, you want to get something out of that person. That would never like people can sense that, right?
Okay, I do want to put a slight caveat on
Mm,
that, actually, because I think very, very early career people have a little bit of an exception to that.
mm,
Because if you are a fresh grad and you're like very, very green just going out in the world, I think a lot of people that have become more established in their career just appreciate the earnestness and the like getting out there. So I don't want to say it's this like just looking for something. I think that's true for almost everyone that has started their career and has become more established, where it's like a little bit more of a peer relationship that you're networking. But I also don't want to uh, scare off anyone that's just starting. Of like, if
mm,
you are just getting out there and like beginning your career, just go out and talk to people. And you know, I I think there's also a lot of people that just want to give back and help younger people
mm,
get ahead. So I think that's a different case, but
mm.
in that circumstance, if you're fresh out of school or still in school, like just go out and talk to people and like to seasoned professionals because there's a bunch of them that like just want to help.
Yeah, I want to help, right? Like, yeah, you got to start somewhere. Yeah,
Don't.
not don't go at all, but go, but thinking about longer term, deeper relationship, right?
Yeah.
Cool. I want to ask about what you think about the pros and cons of startup versus big corporate in your industry or in whatever your your world looks like.
I mean, I think the start of the answer to that question has to be you looking within yourself and saying, what do you want? Um, and there's a couple of different scales that are better for startups, better for corporate. I remember when I was at my last company, and I had never worked for a large organization at that point. I had this thought of like, how do startups survive? I don't get it. You've got these big companies. They've got all this money and they've got all these networks and they've got patient capital and they have like all of this institutional knowledge. And there's this existence proof that startups are successful, but I don't get it. And obviously, this was probably after I just dealt with like a startup type problem. And then I went to Google. And then I tried to sign a contract to Google, like just to buy something. Like I need to buy a camera system or like buy a hydraulic motor or you do a joint development agreement. It's like 4 months to be able to sign a contract. And I'm sure like at EA you deal with some of the similar things of like it's just so slow and so bureaucratic because there's so much on the line. Like Google has a balance sheet that they care about losing. And at the startup, we could go from a handshake agreement and a term sheet off to our lawyers and had a signed contract in like 20 hours. And
Whoa.
the speed was just, it's night and day. So startups, they're really, really great for autonomy, for the ability to just like figure stuff out as it comes up, for having a wide variety of work. Because there's no job ladders in startups. Like you do what needs to get done, and that changes. There's risk is actually an interesting one because in some ways startups are risky, in some ways corporates are risky, just in different contexts. So I don't buy the notion like there's job security in corporates and there's no job security at startups. That's kind of a myth. But it's really there isn't a lot of structure at startups. You'll be doing everything. It'll be like messy but fun. Corporates structured, possibly better work-life balance, depending on the organization. More, this is not necessarily security, but regularity. That
Mm,
is kind of the same thing. Depending on the organization, potentially like amazing people that know their thing exceedingly well. So, at the startup, we like have to make a whole bunch of stuff up. Uh, uh, that like it needs to work well enough, but like we don't know how to do it properly. Like we're kind of blind by the seat of our pants here. We just need something that works. Versus, at Google, like, no, let me reach out to the literal Nobel Prize winner in this area and can like figure out how this thing actually works. So sort of that deep bench is one of the advantages of corporate. So it's a little bit of like what are you looking for out of work and career?
mm. Yeah, that's so true, right? So like I often recommend folks like, oh, they're trying to get into big company, but getting into big company kind of need a nice pedigree or resume already. Like try startup because I started with startup and I learned everything and I learned what I like and what I don't like about doing in the
Yeah,
company, right?
yeah,
Well, another thing is like looking at your career path is just so amazing. Like, whoa, you just got in Google. Oh my God, you're head of a portfolio. That's like insanely high up for me, like in Google, right? Like how did you move up so fast? Do you have any tips to share with the audience? Like,
For the first couple of years at Google, I fought for promotions and was not particularly successful. And in some ways, the most like responsibility I had, and in terms of you look at the job ladder and what you should be doing, in some ways, I checked more boxes in my first role than my last role. But ultimately, what brings promotions or brings success in any circumstance, and I think this is startups or academia or nonprofits or corporate, is delivering value and delivering impact. And it's not about how many people report to you, though, having a big organization can help you deliver more impact. But just doing that isn't a guarantee. It's like, what are you actually making happen that wouldn't have happened that affects the bottom line of the organization for whatever the organization cares about? My first promotion was due to building a camera system, and it was for this like aquaculture project. And it wasn't insane organizational complexity, which the like job letter said I should have been doing. You needed to check that. You need to demonstrate that you could do that. But what ultimately got that out of the line was showing up, building something, flying to Norway, hanging out in like the North Sea in February, but making a project happen. And that's what triggered it. And another one happened because I cleaned up a mess that no one else was willing to take. And that it was a headache for a lot of people, and I made it go away. And that's the kind of like, it's not necessarily about all the ladders and the criteria. And of course that comes into play, but ultimately success is delivering impact and delivering value across any.
yeah. So Joyce, it sounds like you got quite a bit of a good opportunity to get promoted, but do you think that's luck involved in there, or what do you think?
Oh, I mean, of course there's luck. Like, I think this is one of the things that luck is omnipresent in all of these aspects. That so many moments of my career have been serendipitous, and that it happened to come around. But I also don't want to say that luck happens much more frequently than we would think. But it's a combination of like having the foundations of stuff to do and like being ready, but also having the ability, the willingness, the lack of self-preservation, perhaps, to like jump out and take opportunities that are potentially riskier. And I guess that's showing a little bit more that like I'm a bit more risk accepting than many people. But I think opportunities will rarely be presented to you in a job assignment, like just handed to you. There's always a certain amount of you need to go out and seize it, but they also probably won't look that great to start because they're like amazing, perfect, everything is going to go awesome aren't up for grabs. Like those have already been taken by someone that before they're even like assigned out. So they'll always look a little bit rough and like, yeah, do you really want to do that? And it's a little bit of like, how do you pick those? And also being in the place where this seems like something where I have an ability to deliver value, to deliver impact, and I'm going to jump into this thing. And of course, that comes with not having some gas in the tank that you can go and jump on them, often adjacent to or in addition to like your main roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that what Joel is saying, the advice is not just apply to climbing the corporate ladder. It applies to everything, right? Yeah. So thank you, Joel. Is there any final advice you have for our audience?
Um, we're at a really interesting time in this moment in history. I think there's headwinds and tailwinds with all the things going on. It is certainly an uncertain time, and I know a lot of people are scared. I think a lot of people are uncertain, and that's grounded in a huge amount of uncertainty that is in our world right now. On the other side, uncertainty always brings opportunity. And this is a moment of incredible dynamicism and reshuffling. And I don't know what the world of tomorrow is going to look like, but I know it's going to look profoundly different than the world of today. And I think this is just win or lose. This is a very exciting moment in time.
Wow. This is give me the chills. I'm like, yay. I like opportunity. I like change. Well, I'm a little bit not as risk seeking as you, but a little bit. So yeah, well, thank you, Joel, for that final advice. Yeah, and thank you for sharing your story and your words of wisdom. So everyone, if you like today's episode, please support us by clicking the like and subscribe down below. So we'll see you next time. Thank you so much, Joel, for sharing your story with us.
Thanks, Connie. It's been a pleasure.